My name is Shannon Casteel, and I'm going to be talking to you today about living in healthy community. When I was thinking about doing this topic and teaching, I actually thought about the first time that I ever heard someone say something about people and being called to people was in my DTS, and I'd always thought about missions as being called to a certain location or a place. But someone actually came up to me and said, you know, sometimes God calls you to people, not a place. The power of the friendships that we create, where we live intentionally with people who are like-hearted and like-minded, that can hold us fast to the things that we say that we believe. I just felt like there'd be like a challenge that the Lord would have you take on, like, who are you called to? That the Lord would have us like look around and say, okay, Lord, maybe this season isn't necessarily about a location, but it could be about the people. Whether you're working at Starbucks or you're working at your home church or whatever it is, that you would actually begin to ask the Holy Spirit to show you like who God's called you to right where you are.
It's amazing what Shannon does with all these ladies. Really has taken the opportunity that the Lord's given her to pour into young women's lives, and what it's done for all these women has been amazing. You know, preparing them for, you know, futures in ministry, future as mothers and wives. But really is amazing because when she takes these times, she gives you all she has, you know. And I think that's what's really changed these women's lives more than anything. Just somebody being willing.
How's everybody doing?
Oh, so good. Everything's great. Jesus is so good.
Aaron texted me this week and was just like, Shay, can I come to your small group on Saturday morning? Like, yes, of course. Like, we love you. And so we try to be consistent, and like we were kind of going through the Brave Love manual, and just because like some of those just like highlighting those like rhythms of just being women, like with our hearts that have been set before the Lord. How do we create rhythms in our life with the Lord, and that actually would sustain us, whether you guys are here or you're in Berlin or you're in Nepal or you're here or wherever we are, that there's rhythms that God establishes here in this place that we're able to carry with us wherever we go, whether we're all together or we're not all together. So what we started doing, just practically, a few things you can do that we just started doing here. We started asking the Lord, who can we begin to like gather around our table? And we just started having community nights. Everyone would, you know, chip in a few bucks, and we would make a home-cooked meal, and we would just gather around the table and talk about the Lord and just engage with one another and ask each other how people are doing. And we just begin to do that every week being very intentional to just connect with people, and then even having time in our living room just to pray for people. It's so simple. We have like a roadmap in the Bible of like Jesus he did that. He gathered with the disciples around food, and he explained to them and helped them understand what he was trying to teach, or what he was saying in certain things, or what stories meant. And I feel like the Lord, he breathes on that when we like just create a space where he can move. And so, you know, I have 5 kids. And so what I did was I said, okay, when's a great time when I can connect with people, when the kids, where I won't have to get a babysitter. I thought Saturday morning when the kids are watching cartoons anyways. And then I was like, I'm just going to find some swirly, spontaneous, like long thing by Stephanie Grutzinger, and then I'm just going to roll out. You know what I mean? Like 30-minute YouTube video. Like, and so I like click on the first YouTube video that comes up, and I start rowing, and it's the it immediately loads, and it's the song about mercy triumphs over judgment. And the part where she says, yeah, you're not uncertain of the ones that you choose. And I just started crying. Like, I literally just started crying. I'm not a big crier, as you guys all know. And I just started crying. because I realized I was feeling so uncertain of myself. Like feeling so uncertain, but God's like, he doesn't lack in confidence because he's the one that chose me. Like I didn't choose me. He chose me. Like he set me apart for his glory. He told me, Shannon, you're going to be a voice for the nations. And the moment that I began to come into agreement with what he was already saying to me was when something began to happen. Something began to take place. And I feel like sometimes we underestimate the power of things that feel small. And so just continuing to ask the Lord, how can I, if I don't find community, or I don't find these family group nights, or I don't find a small group that I can go to, how can I begin to do that myself? How can I just begin to gather around a table? You know, if you don't have a ton of money, hey, everyone chip in $5. Let's, even just have dessert together and just pray for one another, encourage each other. And I think we underestimate how powerful these moments that feel smaller are. And if we dismiss the things that feel small, or if we think that only the Lord's moving in the nations, but not like in our hometown, then we're going to miss the heart of the Lord. And I really do believe that revival is being birthed in movements that seem small, but they're not. I was thinking about the dangers of even being isolated and kind of getting picked off. It was interesting because I was watching a documentary the other day with my children about just an African safari, planet Earth thing or something. It was talking about how the lion gets his prey. And it was saying that there'll be a huge herd will be going. All of a sudden, a weaker one will begin to fall back. And then what the lion does is it actually isolates the weaker one, and then it can pick them off. And I was watching, and I was just suddenly like struck with this revelation. It's like, man, this really is how it works, how isolation works. When I was thinking about key moments where community for me was just crucial, was when we hit a really hard time, when we had actually lost a child. If we had not been surrounded by people who knew who we were, knew our core values and the pillars of faith that we had built our lives upon in the Lord, of course there was space that was created for us to grieve and to have a hard time, and at the same time to not give up on the Lord and to walk away. If we had not had healthy communities surrounding us that were fighting for us and fighting for the call of God in our lives, we would not have made it. We were so strengthened through such a difficult time by the people that we had surrounded ourselves with. I would just say that if you've not found that where you are, and you legitimately really have sought for it and you've not found it, I would really begin to ask the Lord, where, Lord, do you want me to be where I can immerse myself with healthy community and friendships? People that you can run with. And I think if you find yourself limping and no one to really go to and no one that really understands who you are, understands the call of God in your life, I would ask the Lord, where do you want me to be? Run to those places so that you can begin to live the life in the Lord that you were created to live. I remember when I first came to Kona, and I had actually just come out of a very large church that had wild worship. It was just incredible. And I came here and I legitimately felt that how am I gonna engage in a church if I don't have a church like my home church? And I actually felt like the Lord told me to go to this little tiny church called Living Stones. It's down on the water, and now it's much bigger and full of life. But back then it was very small. It was one woman on an organ, just sitting there playing on an organ, old songs. A lot of them I didn't even know the words. And I went down there, and what the Lord taught me in that time was that it was never going to be about how exciting the worship was or how dynamic the word was, that it was actually the condition of my heart. The health of living in community, whether you're doing amazing or you're really struggling, is surrounding yourself with safety, people who know you, who know the call of God in your life.
Everyone knows what they're going to get from us in terms of, you can tell if we're pumped or disappointed or anything, but we've never been afraid to be vulnerable. And I think when we look at what really has been one of the main things that's really inspired people is the ability to be vulnerable. But I've gotten pretty insanely frustrated with Shannon a couple of times and not knowing what to say at times, because there's people in our house. It's been a challenge, but not embarrassing.
Yeah.
It's been more of like, it's been good because it's really helped me hold to a standard of honor, and where I haven't always been good at it because people haven't been around. It just gives you a little bit more, it holds your integrity a little bit more.
And I think one of the greatest things that I've just been thinking about so much even lately is actually how protected I am, because it's so vulnerable to have people live with you, because they see everything just like your kids do and your husband or your friends that you live with. It's such a vulnerable place, but it's so good because it holds you to the things, again, that common unity. It holds you to those things. It keeps you accountable in your own heart. And I feel the pleasure of the Lord as we've lived our lives out like this, because I know that even if anyone were to stand against us and say that we were a certain way, our home is filled with people that know the truth about us. And I love that.